Okay, welcome. Hi, my name is Mark Dillon. This is How to Transform Cultural Transformation within DevOps at DASA Connect 2023. I'm super happy to be here. I'd like to thank the organizers. I'd like to thank Katrina for inviting me, and let's go. So first off, I work for a company called Efficode. It's been doing DevOps since before it was a thing. I've been doing things that I would consider DevOps and Agile since essentially the 90s in California. And who I am, I've been working in teams, building teams with a focus on products and product creation services for more than 30 years now. I moved to Finland 18 winters ago. And in addition to that, I've been playing guitar my whole life. I recently became a farmer. I'm also, curiously enough, a watchmaker and an avid motorcyclist. The topic today, kind of the subtopic, is Thrive. And there's an interesting story behind this, which is that when Katrina and I had one of the organizers, we had a meet and greet. The idea Thrive kind of came up and it was in the air and we were like, ooh, what is this? And Thrive sounds like something that we want to talk about. And it's kind of just one of those interesting things, you know, you meet somebody across a Zoom call in an airport, and then you get this kind of new word to our DevOps paradigm, Thrive. So only recently I went and looked up the word Thrive, and you know, I kind of had a sense of what it meant, but then I was absolutely delighted when I realized that Thrive means being able to progress in good times or bad, despite or because of the circumstances. So we really want to be able to thrive because not all times are good and not all times are bad, but we need to be able to figure out, and we need to have tools in order to help us be able to thrive in all circumstances. So I want to remind you that you deserve to thrive, and that everyone deserves to thrive and deserves to have a healthy and safe organization, workplace, in order to be able to feel good about yourself and to be able to enjoy the aspects that your work can have while serving others, working with others in order to deliver things. And I believe that we all can thrive. And if we have difficulties thriving where we are, there are some tools, there are techniques, but also sometimes we can make choices. But I just want to remind you once again that you do, in fact, deserve to thrive. So one thing that when I talk with people, and I'm doing it here in front of all of you now, is that I oftentimes open up about something that has affected me in a certain context or in a certain situation in order to try to get the empathy pipeline flowing. So you are in a safe space with me here today, and I feel safe with you here today. And I can tell you, I've been to some dark places, and I've had some burnouts, and I've carried a lot of difficulty with me in my life. I've been successful and I'm happy, but I've also had to carry some burdens, and I've had some burnouts, and I understand these things. Like one pinnacle of this, just to tell a little story, is when I was going through a transition of leadership in a company. The new leadership decided that they needed to punish me. So they sent me an email that made me sick. I got physically sick in the office. So nobody should have to live like that. And this is something that I hope that you never face. But I hope that if you're ever in difficult situations, you have some ways to be able to find ways out. So the reason I say this is, like, I've been interviewed quite a bit in my life, and people always ask, you know, what are your regrets? What are your biggest regrets? And one of the things that I have regretted is not always having the tools that were necessary in a given situation to be able to deal with the humanity. Because we're all humans, we all have emotions, we all have ups and downs, good days and bad, no matter what type of organization that we're in. So I want you to be able to do better than I could in those days. I think I can do better than I could in those days, but I believe that you can do better than I could. So I like tools. Watchmaking has the highest number of tools of any profession. It doesn't mean that I always push tools into DevOps situations, but I also like these kind of virtual tools, or tools that we can use in conversation, in negotiation, in discussion. And I've got more or less 3 of those for you today. So the first one has to do with motivation. And as a line manager, as a leader in different situations, I've talked about motivation in many different ways. I used to think in terms of collaborating to get things done in order to make a positive difference in the world and things like this. But recently I had a situation where a colleague was having some difficulty, and they were in a really difficult situation. And unfortunately, at the time, they were really stressed. They didn't know what to do. And they came and they asked me, could I help them? So I thought for a little while in front of them right there. And I said, okay, now the reasons to do the job that you are in starts with the customer. So if you are able to serve a customer, if you are happy to be able to serve that customer, or you have a sense of purpose serving the customer, I think this is one of the most important things of work. And the other of the most important things of work is the colleagues. So if we focus on the customer and the colleagues, is that a win? Is that enough? Okay, well, if you are happy and the colleagues are happy, maybe even your customer is happy, and your boss is happy, then okay, that doesn't sound too bad if we focus on the customer and the colleague and everybody's happy. But I felt like there was a missing link, and I was a bit uncertain what was missing. And I came across another word called collateral. And collateral is an adjective, additional or secondary. So what's the extra thing? Now, when I talk about collateral, I don't mean secondary in cases of work-life balance. You must have balance in your life, and you must have balance with your customers and your colleagues as well. But there's an extra thing, and one of the things that's interesting about this is, well, first off, it gives me the 3 C's of motivation. But if I think about, okay, do I like the customer that I'm serving? Do I have a sense of purpose there? Do I like the colleagues that I'm working with, and we're able to work together towards common goals of serving those customers? Then the collateral is the thing that's going to be the most different for people. People are going to have different choices. They're going to pick a different row, a different column. They're going to have a different completely point of view on what the extra part is of your life, the part that's away from work, 2/3 of your life. So for me, I recently bought a little red farmhouse. That's not exactly it, but it kind of looks like that. It's in a little bit better condition. But I kind of looked at that, and I looked at my hobbies, and I thought to myself that, okay, my collateral isn't really my little red farmhouse, and it's not really my hobbies, but my collateral is the ability to sustain and keep doing what I do. Not only my hobbies and my farm and other things, but serving my customers and getting a sense of purpose in that, and working with my colleagues and having a sense of camaraderie there, a sense of team, a sense of collective purpose in the world. So I want to be able to keep doing, this is one of the things that I absolutely love to do. I love to speak with people in small groups or from stages or whatever. And what I urge you to do is to know what your collateral is and study it and write it down. Look at the balance. Understand that work is about essentially, it's about business, right? But it's about being a part of a team that gets to serve a customer closely. All the agile principles, customer interactions, DevOps principles about continuous delivery, it's all about serving the customer and making things easy for the team. So the variable part is the collateral, and what does that mean to you? So once again, motivation, customer, colleague, collateral. Does that help you thrive at all? It helps me thrive a little bit, but there's more. Let's go a little deeper. So if you don't have the ability to do this, you have some choices to make. If you can't work within your organization, or you're not motivated by your customer. It could be that you need to make a difficult choice. It could be that you need to learn different techniques in order to be able to do something, or have some social mobility within your company. It could mean that you don't really know what your collateral is, and your work life kind of collapses when you step away from the office, and you have to find things in order to bring the balance to your life. It could be a combination of those. But if those aren't in balance, you need to look at those and study them, or make some difficult choices. So one of the choices that I made along the way was about seeking safety. I was in a pathological organization, and I was actually, at the time, I was a customer of my current employer, EFICode. And every year, at the end of the year, EFICode sends out the trends, the DevOps trends for the coming year. And the DevOps trends for 2022, number one was psychological safety. And I was like, oh my gosh, bring me home. This is the place where I would like to be. Some company that gets it. I did a little poll around to understand how well people feel safety in various companies and various situations. And it tends to have a lot of variance. But one of the things that got really interesting was when Dr. Westrom, it's 9 years ago now, put together the cultural dynamics of organizations and turned it into science. Now, if you haven't looked at Westrom organizational culture, I urge you to. And one of the things that's really important here is to understand that there's a lot of different things to look at. This is a matrix, which is an extract from there. But we can kind of highlight something. And this is kind of where my studies led me. So I was in a pathological organization at a point, and the pathological organization tends to have a lack of dialogue. There may be leaders with a lack of empathy. There may be members in the team or in the organization that have some communication skills, problems with their communication skills. It can be that rather than having data or science-based looking at things, somebody from the top kind of shoots from the hip. But pathological organization is, generally speaking, that there are a lot of pathologies or problems. And it can be quite difficult to move forward. In a bureaucratic organization, rules are the thing. Many mature organizations are very bureaucratic, and bureaucracy by itself, although it does tend to slow things down, people will say, well, you must have rules. If we think about Management 3.0, which I think is about 10 years old now, Jürgen Appelow's work, we are talking about minimal constraints. So like, what's the minimum rules that we need in order to have basically a generative organization? If we look at SAFE, it's guardrails, if I remember correctly. So we need to have something, but the problem with bureaucracy is that it doesn't handle the corner cases very well. There's not a rule for that, or there's not a process for that. And humanity has just a zillion different kinds of ways of creating things that don't fit into structures very well. But when we have a generative organization, then we're able to better take advantage of that. And we're able to better understand that, okay, like the favorite story, and I think it's one of the oldest stories on innovation in the world, is the guy that spills the rubber on the stove and it turns hard, and he named it vulcanization, and his name was Goodyear. So a generative organization is able to look at every situation and try to figure out what we can learn for it and how we can move forward in an experimentative and psychologically safe way. So when I come back to Westrom organizational culture and I look at all of these rows and columns, I kind of realized something, that this is really interesting, the messenger. So shoot the messenger. I was told that by a customer this week, that they tended to have this kind of culture. And I think we all know this one. This is one of the oldest ones in all of this area. I think it's even from the movies and from times past, different types of stories. Ignore the messenger is what we do with bureaucracies. In a bureaucracy, the messenger needs to get to the back of the line, or we don't have a rule or a process for that, or I'm sorry, sir, you're at the wrong window. Or, hey, something funny just happened with this machine over here. I'll just reboot it, right? So ignore the messenger is a big thing with bureaucratic organizations. But within a generative organization, we train the messenger. Okay, train the messenger. Wait a minute. If we come back to Western organizational culture and we look at the messenger and we think about, okay, if we have an organization that has cooperation issues, can cooperation be increased through communication? If we train people how to communicate, train the messenger, could that improve the cooperation of an organization? If we look at bridging, which is crossing the silos, once again, back to Patrick Dubois' crossing the silos is the definition of DevOps. Everything else is just engineering. So bridging is also communication across the silos. Would training the messenger and understanding how to receive and transmit the messages help here as well? Failure is another interesting one. If we don't train the messengers and they're afraid to speak up, then we don't understand what really brought that machine down. It's actually going to bring down the whole server farm later. By the way, I have a vegetable farm, not a server farm. Same thing about novelties. Hey, look over here, something happened. That's about training the messenger, having where do they communicate that? How do they raise it up? Who follows up on it? How do we share the responsibility of those? So I could argue that all of the elements of Western organizational culture can be improved initially by the messenger, because we are all the messenger. And if we train the messengers to understand better how to communicate, think of all the things we can do better. So how we give and receive feedback, blameless postmortems, how we do mentoring and coaching and creating things together, how we put together our mission statements, and everything about collaborating on the company can be improved by training the messenger. And plus, I can feel more safe knowing that I can speak up or say I'm having a bad day or saying I'm good at these things. I need somebody that's good at those things so that we can work together and I can be more successful. So it's about all of those. Interesting. But then what are these messenger trainings? What is this? We're on the third tool, by the way. So nonviolent communication is one that I have recently learned in VC. And it starts with observing something. What do you see? Right? Just what do you see in front of you? And then how does it make you feel? This takes a bit of bravery to be able to speak up about how you feel, but still, if you see something and it makes you feel some way, does it create a need in you? Can you communicate those things? There's a fourth part of NVC, which sometimes in some trainings is in and sometimes is out, called I request. Just because I request doesn't necessarily mean that somebody needs to help, but it does mean that at least I was able to communicate. These are the things that I've observed. Now, they don't necessarily just have to be facts. Of course, if you're observing facts that are immutable or that are empirical, that are right there in front of us all, that's great. But your perspective is also your own. So nobody can argue with your perspective because that's how you see the things. That's what you feel. Okay? So sometimes when we are observing, we just try to reflect what we can see. There's another technique called mirroring, but just reflecting what we see. And then this the hard part, the telling the feeling. So depending on the organization and the people around you, it can be difficult to be brave about that, but it's a practice. So nonviolent communication is a practice. People can train your organization or your team. You can study it with a few colleagues or friends. You can also use the exact same technique to talk about the good things. I observe that the DevOps community is really moving fast in making people's lives better. It makes me feel good to feel a part of it, and I need to continue studying and contributing so that this movement can continue. That type of thing. So a lot of this comes to being able to express yourself and having an environment where you're comfortable to be able to express yourself. Describing your needs, being able to understand the things that are affecting you. What do you need to be able to get through those difficult times? Understanding that you're not alone and that you can ask for help and make a request. They won't always say yes, but at least you've been able to communicate your situation. And if you show a little bit of vulnerability, I think that you'll find that it's amazing how you can get others into a situation where they show a little bit of vulnerability. And then we're going not only surviving a situation, but we're moving to thriving in a situation. So I have summed up the takeaways for you. So key takeaway of motivation. I believe the customer and the colleague are practically immutable. If those aren't working for you and you can't make them work through whatever means are available or necessary, then maybe you want to look at something different. If you understand what your collateral is and you balance this work-life balance, but make sure that you understand how it fits in the work that you do on a daily basis. With Western organizational culture, please, we're all the messenger. You're the messenger, I'm the messenger. Let's train the messengers. And finally, with nonviolent communication, I have observed that it was a pleasure to speak to you today. It makes me feel really good to have this opportunity, and I once again thank the organizers for being able to allow me to do this. And I need you to know that you're not alone and that you as well deserve to thrive. Thank you very much. My name is Mark Dillon. I'm a lead consultant at EFICode, and this has been DASA Connect 2023. Thank you.